You want to start sewing, but there's one thing standing in your way. It's the sewing machine, and I can help you with that. You're thinking to yourself that you need to be able to sew something like this, but you're wondering, how do I even do that? It looks pretty complicated, but that's not what you need to be thinking about right now. You need to be thinking about what's the first step. There are certain steps that you have to follow in order to get to the ultimate goal of making your first stitch. So I want your goal right now to be making your first stitch. The reason why we procrastinate is because we're thinking too big. We're thinking about too many things at once. But really, we just need to think, what's the first thing that I need to do? And then after you do that first thing, you ask yourself, what's the second thing I need to do? Then what's the third? Then what's the fourth? But you ask yourself that only when you get there. I have created a guide, and this guide actually has all of the steps that I'm going to show you in this video. So go to the link in my description to get that guide, print it out. Don't use it on your phone, don't use it on your iPad, don't use it on your computer. Go to the print shop or buy a printer or use your printer and print it on a piece of paper, okay? When you have a piece of paper in your hand, you process the information a lot better. And when you have this guide printed, if your phone is dead or your phone is damaged or you just don't feel like being on your phone, you will still have this guide to help you to use your sewing machine. Okay, so first things first, you need to take your sewing machine outside of the box. Like, what do you mean you buy a sewing machine and it's still there in the box from last year? Are you kidding me? Take it out the box. And when you take it out the box, I need you to look at all the pieces that you get with it. And then you know what you're gonna do? You're gonna just put them nicely into the drawer that comes with your sewing machine. You don't need to worry about all of that just yet. Let's make this as simple as possible, okay? You're overcomplicating it, and that's why you're gonna start sewing it. And sewing is actually so much easier than you think, you know. If you're brave enough to drive a car, you can be brave enough to use a sewing machine. If you're brave enough to get on an airplane, you can be brave enough to use a sewing machine. Your sewing machine is gonna come with a plug. Regardless of the brand of sewing machine that you have, the plug is most likely going to be on the right hand side of the sewing machine. So you're going to plug it in. I'm using the Singer 6600C, so my plug-in setup looks very different than the usual, but it doesn't matter. All of the things I'm going to tell you right now still apply, right? So once you have your sewing machine plugged in, or at least this part of it plugged in, you're gonna also plug it into the wall. Most sewing machines have this attachment, so I'm gonna put that into the wall. After plugging it in, you want to turn it on. My sewing machine has the on and off button here, so I'm gonna click that. I'm going to actually do that again so that you guys can see what happens. This is a computerized sewing machine. So mine has lights and all of that fancy stuff, but if you have a manual sewing machine, you won't see any lights other than right here. Once you have turned your sewing machine on, familiarize yourself with the parts of the sewing machine. This right here is the foot pedal. This is what you're gonna step on in order to get your sewing machine to start stitching. Think about this like the gas pedal. When you drive, you need to step on the gas pedal in order for your car to go. So this is your gas pedal, okay? So I'm gonna put this on the floor. The next thing you need to do is to get your thread. This is what's gonna create the stitch. And thread comes from two parts on your sewing machine. The top being the needle and the bottom being the bobbin. This is a bobbin. And if you don't have a bobbin in your sewing machine, you can't stitch. So you're gonna fill that bobbin up. In order to do that, you take your thread and you put it right here. You loop the thread underneath number 1 and then you pass it around this, right? So you hold the thread down, go like this, and come over here. So right there, you have the thread around this tension disc. It's important that it goes around this tension disc, because if it doesn't go around this tension disc, it's not gonna wind on the bobbin as tightly as it needs to. Okay, play that part of the video over as many times as you need. Then you're gonna take your bobbin and put the thread into the hole that's on the top of it. So it's gonna be like this, right? So I put the thread in from the inside of the bobbin, from underneath here up to the top, and then I take the thread and I put it on top of the bobbin winder. So you go from here with the thread being on this thread stand, and then you go underneath here, that's number one, and then you make a loop around here, bring it around the front, then you go around to the back and come over here. What's awesome about sewing machines these days is that they are labeled. It's actually on the sewing machine. It shows you the way that you're supposed to wrap it. And then when you get over here and you put it on the bobbin winder, there's actually an image here as well that tells you. This may not be the case with all sewing machines, but like I said, I'm using the 6600C, so if this excites you and you like all the labeling on it, then go ahead and get it, okay? Use my code SewQuaint10 in order to get 10% off on their website. I don't think you need a specific sewing machine in order to learn how to sew, as long as it's beginner friendly enough. It doesn't matter if it's computerized or if it's manual. You just want to at least have a willing mind, be good at following instructions, and then just get it done. You're gonna get better and better and better and better, okay? So don't overcomplicate the type of sewing machine that you get. It doesn't matter. But if you do want a manual sewing machine, you can get the Singer 4423. So that's 4423. And if you want to get a good computerized sewing machine, then you can get the 6600C. I also really love the 6800C because it has some really cool features, like being able to stitch without stepping on the foot pedal, or being able to slow down the speed of the sewing machine or turn it up. I can do a review video on that if you want. Just comment down below and I got you. Anyway, let's get back to this. You now want to make sure that you click it to the right. If you don't click it to the right, the bobbin will not fill. On this sewing machine, it says SP when it's clicked to the right. I'm gonna click it to the left, and this goes on a stitch design, which it's all of this stuff, but you don't have to worry about that right now. So up here, right, you click it to the right, so that way it's ready to spin. And then you step on the foot pedal, and that is gonna make your bobbin start filling. At this point, you can cut off that extra thread at the top there and just keep on stepping on the foot pedal. The bobbin is gonna fill up, and when it's done filling, it's going to start rubbing on this thing right here. So it's gonna stop all on its own. And my thread is done. So I didn't get to show you guys that it stops on its own, but it does. So you're just gonna keep on stepping on that foot pedal, and when the bobbin is full, it will stop by itself. You can stop earlier if you want to. You can stop before it's done if you feel like you don't need a full bobbin, but this is what the bobbin looks like when it's all full. Now you need to add the bobbin to the sewing machine. To do this, you're gonna make sure that you have a P shape with your bobbin. So the thread it should be coming from the top over to the left in the shape of a P. And then you're gonna just slide that into the bobbin case, and you're gonna do a motion like this with your left hand, okay? So you hold down the bobbin with your right hand. I mean, you don't even have to hold it down, but that's something I like to do. You hold down the bobbin with your right hand, and then you swing this thread with your left hand, and you bring it around the groove so it goes around this. Let's just do that again actually. So it goes behind this, there's gonna be a hook on your sewing machine where the bobbin case is, so you make sure that your thread goes behind that hook. This is the part that a lot of beginners mess up because they don't install their bobbin properly, and if your thread does not go behind this hook, then your stitches are gonna come out looking jacked up. Okay, so make sure that you put the thread behind this hook, and then you just bring it around this curve right here. There's actually an arrow on it where you bring the thread around and you go like this. Okay, and then you put the bobbin case back on. So now the bobbin is covered. If your bobbin is not covered, you cannot stitch. So you have to make sure that you put this back on. Now my sewing machine has labeling on it that shows exactly how to wrap the thread. So if you follow this guide, you can't go wrong. Okay, so we've covered one of the most important steps, because if you don't have a bobbin in your sewing machine, you cannot make a stitch. I always like to say that when it comes to sewing, if you miss one single step or you do it the wrong way, everything falls apart. And that's the reason why sewing is so frustrating for a lot of people, because sometimes there's one thing that's off and you can't figure it out and you're just like, sewing is not for me. But it's not that sewing is not for you, it's just that you don't know yet because you're new to sewing. Okay, so give yourself some grace. Next, you need to thread the machine. And when I say thread the machine, I'm talking specifically about the needle, because remember earlier in the video I said there are two threads in your machine. The top thread being the needle and the bottom thread being the bobbin. So we've already taken care of the bottom thread. Now we're gonna take care of the top thread. So you're gonna take your thread and you're gonna put it up top here, just like when we were filling the bobbin. You also have the option to put it here instead, but I like to put it on the top. If you put it here, it's gonna dance around while you're sewing. So here are two ways that you can actually stop that from happening. So there's this cap that comes with your sewing machine. You can just put it right there and that will stop your spool from moving all about. You can also use this piece. This piece helps it to not move around. And next, you're gonna put your thread behind step number 1. Then you put it behind step number 2. This sewing machine is labeled, so it has numbers for every single one of the steps. You might be thinking other brands have that too, and that's very true. But some of these sewing machines actually don't have labeling on them. So I will die by the Singer sewing machines, not just because I'm an ambassador, but because they are very excellent at labeling things and making it easy for beginners to understand. So let's take a close look. You go from the thread stand here, behind step number 1, around step number 2, and now we're moving towards step number 3. The number is in black, so it's not all that clear, but this is step number 3. You put the thread through this groove, and this is step number 4. So you wrap the thread around step number 4 and you bring it up to the top. This is step number 5. This is another place where beginners get stuck all the time. If this hook isn't visible, you're not going to be able to pass the thread behind it. Look at this. There's no hook. You can't see the hook. So if you thread and you miss that hook, you're going to get bird's nest at the back of your fabric. So this is where you want to bring the hand wheel forward. And once you bring it forward, the hook will appear. Now you're going to take the thread and put it behind the hook. You see how it comes behind the hook right there? That's exactly what you want. And then you come down to step 6. You bring the thread behind this hook, and there's another hook here. Bring the thread behind this hook as well. Now you can thread the needle. Make sure that your needle is in the highest position, and you do that by moving the hand wheel. So you move the hand wheel forward and then keep on moving it until your needle is in the highest position. Once your needle is in the highest position, you're gonna put the thread through the eye of the needle. This is the part that a lot of people dread, but it's actually not that hard. It's just needle and thread. And you do this all the time when you're hand sewing, assuming that you've hand sewn in your life. But you just take the end of the thread and you put that through the eye of the needle from front to back, not from back to front, okay? And you just pull on the thread. This is what happens when you try to do things with one hand. You just pull, oh my gosh, gotta be kidding me. Anyway, so you just pull on the thread. Now, here's a classic problem that's happening because I am only using one hand to do this. My thread looped in here and it's now creating a knot. But I don't want that, and that happens to a lot of beginners. So you want to make sure that you pull that thread out. Make sure that there are no knots, and make sure that your thread isn't wrapping around your needle like this. You want to make sure that the thread is coming from the front around to the back. So sometimes you'll have to like shimmy that over and free it up and do a bunch of acrobatics. Like, oh my gosh, this is not helping my case. Anyway, there we go. So the thread travels from this hook to this hook around here. Then it comes down the front of the needle, through the eye of the needle, out the back of the needle. Okay, so now my thread is like this. In my left hand, I'm gonna pass that thread between the toes of the presser foot. So now my thread is at the back. I'm gonna make sure that I collect the bobbin thread with the thread from the needle. In order to do that, I'm gonna bring my hand wheel towards me and look at what's gonna happen inside the bobbin case. So the thread gets picked up, and you might have to do this a few times. You just hold on to your needle thread and you're gonna see that the bobbin thread is getting pulled. Okay, now when it comes here, you can go ahead and grab that bobbin thread, and now you have the top thread and the bottom thread in your hand. If this feels confusing for you, just watch this part of the video over as many times as you need to and print that guide. Read it as many times as you need to. I feel like one of the biggest problems that we face in today's day and age is wanting to be perfect at something the moment that we start it, or wanting to just catch it immediately. But if you don't catch it right away, that doesn't mean that you're any less intelligent than somebody who catches it right away. So I'm gonna just recap all of what I just said to help you guys to just season in and marinate in everything that I just said. So first, you're gonna put your thread on the thread stand, whether it's over here or here, and then you use the little tools and gadgets to help your thread to stay. Because if you're stitching while your thread is on this without something to hold it, without the spool cap, it's gonna go all about the place, okay? And then you're gonna follow the numbers on your sewing machine. It's really that simple. So you go to step 1 first, and then you go behind step 2, and then you go down through step 3, and then around step 4, and then you make sure that the hook at step 5 is exposed, and then you wrap the thread around step 5, and then you come through the groove at step 6, and then you go behind hook number 1 and then hook number 2, and then you thread the eye of the needle. And make sure that your thread is running down the front of the shaft of the needle. If it's twisted or there's a knot, that's a recipe for problems. So make sure that it's going straight down, thread from front to back. So from the front of the needle to the back of the needle. And then after that, you're gonna move the hand wheel towards you at least 2 or 3 times, and that's gonna pick up the bobbin thread. If the bobbin thread and the needle thread aren't meeting each other, you are not ready to start stitching. Don't rush this process. Take your time. If I had to learn how to start sewing in 30 days, day one, I would take my sewing machine out of the box and I would look at it and I'd get familiar with it. I'd learn about the name of the different parts and I'd learn what each part does. Maybe day two, I would learn how to fill the bobbin, and then day three, I would learn how to thread the needle. And day four, I would learn how to do my first stitch. And then I would just do the same thing over and over again until I get it. Until I get it. I would just do it over and over and over and over again. When I bought my first sewing machine, I took it out of the box immediately because I was so excited. And thankfully at that point in time, they were sending CD manuals with sewing machines. So I could put that into my laptop when laptops actually had CD parts. Good times. And I played that and I was able to see exactly how to set up my sewing machine. So I'm really hoping that this visual I gave you is close enough to that CD manual type of video that I got when I started sewing. Another thing, stop striving for perfection. You don't have to get it all right away. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to learn how to set up your sewing machine first. When you have your thread like this and everything is threaded, your bobbin is in, your needle is threaded, you are one step closer to learning how to sew. I would say that the next step that you need to take is to actually start stitching. But you do need to know about stitch width, stitch tension, and stitch length. So watch this video right here to learn all about that, but watch that after this, okay? Your sewing machine is gonna come being automatically on a straight stitch, and you don't need to worry about stitch length just yet, but that could easily be your next lesson. So now I want you to get a scrap piece of fabric. Even if you just have a handkerchief or old clothes that you don't wear anymore, old bed sheets, something like this could work. This is just a scrap piece of fabric from a project that I was working on months ago. It doesn't have to be anything big. No big deal. You're not making anything right now. Take the pressure off of yourself. Tell yourself at the beginning of your sewing session, my intention is just to learn how to set up my sewing machine. My only intention is to learn how to set up my sewing machine. All I'm focusing on right now is setting up my sewing machine. So if you want to skip this step and then do this on your second sewing session, then fine. Don't pressure yourself. And you want to make sure that your presser foot is up. Think about the presser foot like your literal feet that you walk on the floor with. Just imagine you're sitting down and someone starts to sweep. They ask you to move your feet. You lift your feet up so that they can sweep underneath your feet. Think about the fabric in the same way. We're gonna sweep underneath the presser foot. So you're gonna raise up your foot. This right here is the floor. The throat plate is the floor. So take your feet off the floor, and you're gonna do that with this piece right here. On other sewing machines, it's gonna be at the back. So you just raise that up so that you can take the foot off the floor. If you don't raise the presser foot, the fabric can't go under. Put your fabric under the presser foot. And now that that's done, you can lower the presser foot. So you're gonna put your foot back on the floor. So you put your foot down, and that right there is gonna hold the fabric steady. Look, I'm pulling on the fabric and the fabric won't come out. That's because the presser foot is adding pressure to the fabric. That's what stabilizes the fabric. It won't move. Your fabric is secure. Now you can actually make a stitch. And that's gonna be done by stepping on the foot pedal. First though, I need you to lower the needle into the fabric. So you're gonna do that by moving the hand wheel towards you until the needle goes down into the fabric. And actually, before we even step on the foot pedal, I want to show you how the entire stitching mechanism happens. When you move the hand wheel towards you, it creates a stitch. You can see that the fabric is moving. And what is causing that to happen? Beginner sewists always think that they need to be the ones moving the fabric, and that's just not the case. You don't need to move the fabric at all. The fabric is gonna move on its own. Actually, not really on its own. There's something that causes that to happen. I'm going to tell you about that soon. But you don't need to move the fabric. You just need to step on the foot pedal and keep your fabric steady. So step on the foot pedal, step gently. Step as if you are trying to not break a speed limit of 10. That's very slow. Stitch slowly. And you want to stop stitching before you get to the end of the fabric, because if you stitch off the end of the fabric, you can throw the timing of the sewing machine off, your thread can come undone, a bunch of things can happen. So just don't stitch off of your fabric. Once you get to the end of your fabric, you're going to make sure that your needle is up by moving the hand wheel forward again until the thread comes all the way up. You also want to make sure that when you look into the bobbin case, this thread isn't there. So let's keep going. So the thread has disappeared, and now I can raise my presser foot, take my feet off the floor, and pull my fabric out. When you cut your thread, cut right next to the fabric, not next to the presser foot, because if you cut next to the presser foot, when you're ready to stitch again, the thread is gonna come off the needle. Now this is the stitch that has been created. This is the top side of the fabric, and this is the bottom side of the fabric. So this thread comes from the bobbin, and this thread comes from the needle. Like I mentioned earlier, there's something that actually moves the fabric and makes it so that you don't have to move it. And that is the feed dogs. Every time the needle goes down, the feed dogs go up and down, and they're moving in that direction each time. That is what moves the fabric forward, okay? So every time the needle stitches, and every time you step on the foot pedal, and every time you move the hand wheel, the feed dog is moving up and down from here to there. So that's what moves your fabric. And that's pretty much all you need to know about using a sewing machine. Like I said, don't focus on sewing anything complicated for now. As a matter of fact, don't focus on sewing anything. Just spend the next couple of days or even weeks mastering setting your sewing machine up and then making a stitch on some scrap fabrics. When you feel confident enough in that, you can move on to a very simple sewing project like a cushion. But if this video was helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it with a sewing friend, and subscribe for more sewing content just like this one. Yay! Yeah, what she said.